like this is the state of the art printing press that they probably are just going to use to make election posters. And it costs 1.6 million quid in order to get this printing press. And this story comes from 2019, and it is of the Oireachtas, where basically, if you don't know what the Oireachtas is, they oversee. This is a very loose, general basis. What they do, a lot more things, but they basically oversee the Irish government on spending and other things. And when there's a big hoo-ha or drama, people are brought up to the Oireachtas, and they have to explain themselves. So you imagine like these people would have, like, you'd expect better than this, but they decided that they wanted to buy a printing press, and they might as well go state of the art printing press, because they buy a Comey GL529 printing press, and this is like, you can't get better printing press than this. It is state of the art. When you print stuff and it dries it in record time and high definition finishes, can't buy anything better than this printing press. It cost 808,000 to buy. When it got here, it didn't fit into the building that they wanted to store it in. So first of all, they had to rent out a place that it would fit in, which cost them 2,000 a month, and they had to lower the floor or else raise the ceiling in order to get the printing press that they paid 800,000 for after that. Now, after they bought it, there was like VAT and other, they had to buy add-ons and all. It cost 1.3 million. By the time they actually were able to fit it into the building, it cost 1.6 million quid in order to have this printing press. They bought it like around November 2019.
Yeah, this kind of sounds to me like, you see it on Facebook the whole time. You know when somebody orders something off Wish?
Yes.
And then it's like fucking too big or too small. Or, Spinal Tap, where they ordered the backdrop for Stonehenge and it was fucking this big stupid fucking thing.
Yeah, exactly. It arrives to your house and it just doesn't fit in your house, or it's just so unpractical to actually for you to actually have this, that it wasn't worth you buying it in the first place. And like that's what I kind of imagine here. So what happened? They got it work done. It cost 1.6 million, and they're like, "Well, we bought." I remember when this actually happened. They're like, "Well, we bought it now. What else can we do?" It was like, "Well, you could probably return it, or maybe sell it like what everyone else does when they buy useless crap." Yeah, so like even if it costs 1.3 million, like how many leaflets or flyers are you printing each year that you couldn't outsource this job?
I suppose you probably couldn't really outsource it when you think about it. Like, whatever, particularly government, if you're a normal business, maybe you could outsource it, but like the government is probably printing some seriously like classified shit.
Okay, so they might need a printing press themselves. Fair enough. They probably don't need this printing press, because when they got the work done, they got the extension onto their building. They got it fitted. 1.6 million already spent. They had to spend another 195,000 on an air conditioning system for the printer itself.
I don't understand these things. Like, why do companies make these things that can't cool themselves?
Yeah, exactly. Well, they kind of, I imagine what they expected. This thing is a high-end, high production product that this is going into a building that's a huge, large factory that there's already going to be ventilation in place. They probably didn't expect some government building that this thing would be trying to be shoved into, and that the room had to be built around the printing press rather than it fitting into the room itself. So imagine that generally, if you're using this in a factory, that you don't need like air conditioning system. It's just that probably the room was too small for the printing press, so it was probably overheating. So then they had to once again use bring in like 195,000, nearly 200, pretty much 200,000 euros worth of an air conditioning system.
Did anybody get fired over this?
I don't think so. I'd be highly surprised if anyone actually got fired over it. So now you're like, okay, they spent 195,000 on an air conditioning system. They spent 1.6 million on getting this thing into the building and it being there. Finally, we'll get a bit of use out of this. Nope, that definitely didn't happen either, because one, they had to then buy a forklift in order to load the machine, because it was far bigger than the one that they've previously been using. So they had to get like I don't know if they had more than likely they had a person who could drive a forklift, and there probably was a forklift, but they couldn't load it by manually. So they had to then probably get another forklift and a guy just to load the printer itself. So
Like this is kind of like a fucking bad Carry On movie or something.
yeah, like this, it seems like a skit. It seems like so. Then you're like, okay. So they got the forklift. They probably, hopefully, they bought a second hand. Hopefully, they didn't fork out for a state of the art forklift to go with their state of the art printing press that they've already overpaid for by nearly 2 million quid. This is coming up to 2 million quid. Hopefully, you cheaped out on the forklift. Maybe they had enough forklifts so they didn't have to do that. But imagine if this thing's going to be in regular use, that that forklift, it was already being used for something else. That they don't just have them sitting up. It's still sitting idle.
Just sell it to somebody now at this stage.
Well, at this stage, you're too far in. You've built the building around this. You paid 195,000 for an air conditioning system, and since November 2019, this thing has been sitting idle because nobody knows how to use it. There's no person in the building that can operate the printing press. They haven't figured it out, and because of COVID-19, there's an expert in England that was meant to fly over in order to do a training with the people who work in the Oireachtas in order to use the printing press, but he can't because of obviously flying restrictions and the company not wanting to send a guy over during the pandemic. And apparently this thing isn't something that you can do a YouTube tutorial on or can't be explained over the phone. So this thing, since 2019 and to this day, and probably for most of this year, if not into next year, this thing will just be sitting idle. And whatever leaflets they are being printing isn't being done on this state-of-the-art printer. They probably, I imagine they fucked out their old printer press. I imagine that they like this one took up so much room that they probably had to sell off the other one. So they probably are outsourcing at this stage their printing needs.
Yeah, I just slap that fucking thing on done deal and get rid of it.
Buy and sell.
Just fucking get rid of it.
Yeah, Ikomi GL529 unused in mint condition, comes with a state-of-the-art air conditioning system.
Yeah, it comes with free building.
Yeah.
Suitable for all your government needs.
Yeah.
Comes with forklift and forklift driver.
Paid in Barry's tea and donuts. I remember buying a punch dummy because I decided when I was doing mixed martial arts, and I was like, I'm gonna do home workouts. I got super obsessed about training, and to the point where I was like, I'm gonna do home workouts in between training, and I'm gonna use this. And this giant box arrived at the house one day. I hadn't told my parents that I'm buying this thing. I haven't told anyone about it. And I arrived home one day with this giant box, and everyone was like, "What the fuck's in this box?" It came in. Actually, there's 2 boxes that it came in, and they're like, "What the fuck did you buy?" And I was like, it finally arrived. And then I see it, unwrap it, and they're like, "Is that a sex doll?" I was like, "No, it's not a sex doll. It's a punching dummy." And then I stuck it in my room. And this thing, you have to pour water into it. This one, it sits on a pole, and then there's a basin of water, so it doesn't move around. Except the basin of water does move around, and every time I hit it, it would bounce off the ground from upstairs. So it made such to the point where people were like, "Stop using that in the house, put it in the garden." I was like, "No, I'm not putting it in the garden." So if I wanted to use it, it just makes such a racket. I didn't spend 1.6 million on it. I got it on sale. I got it on auction. I think we've all been there where we've bought this outlandish thing, and we're just we're trying to justify it. Right? Well, I can use it for this as well, and then you're just like, it has. But this thing hasn't been used. It probably cost about 2 million quid at this stage, and it'll probably be in a museum one day about this outlandish purchase. They'll be like, "Here's the printing press that Irish people paid 2 billion quid for and never used."
They'd have to build a fucking museum around it.
Print in high definition colors, not use toxic paints that would be damaging for staff around it. Fair enough. Seems great and all.
Well, it's not good for the environment now. Is they had to fucking start fucking knocking bits out of the building and rebuilding the fucking thing and getting some lad in a forklift. Like a forklift isn't good for the environment.
Well, actually, most forklifts now are electric, Ken.
Yeah, but the chances are they had to get the forklift cheap because they spent all their money. So they probably got a fucking forklift from
Like
the 70s.
this is coming from the government who spent the most that money that ever been spent on a hospital. This is not even the first time these things happen. Like we've spent, I think it's more than 2 billion quid. I think it was.
Ask the assistant there.
Hey Google, what did the Irish government spend on the new state-of-the-art children's hospital tool?
On the website irishmirror.ie, they say it is now estimated that the hospital will cost an estimated 2.4 billion euros. Do you want a little more context?
No. 2.4 billion quid on a hospital. Like, in a country that has only 4 million people, we spent 2.4 billion on a hospital. Like, it's insane. And like, so these kind of things every now and again come along where you realize that there's been like 50 million spent on like jacket or paper clips, or there's some outlandish spending. You're like, well, it needed to be done because of this, and it's done now. And they're like, that's their always excuse. They're like, well, it's done now, and there's nothing we can do. And there's like, well, you could probably be fired. Like, you could probably lose your job, like what would happen in any other business, but apparently no.